All right, guys, I am late by 1 or 2 minutes. It looks like 3 minutes as of now. But welcome to the stream. I was totally talking to myself by myself, thinking that I was talking to anybody who popped in. But seeing as the go live button has just been hit 30 seconds ago, welcome to anybody who's joining in. And so I was saying earlier that as of these past couple of days, I've been in a bit of a writing frenzy with Kenix. And so a lot of my attention's been getting put towards the final chapters of the first arc. And right now, the main protagonist, he's in a fight with a particular creature. And I don't have any artwork drawn for that. So today, that's what we're going to take a look at. I'm going to kind of show you the step-by-step process of how I'm going to take this idea that's in my head and how I'm going to put it right here into Sketchbook Pro, and then finally just make that official concept art for Kenix. So first and foremost, for anybody who pops in who wants to have a word, say anything, don't feel shy. I've got my chat window to the other screen, but I need to go and take a look at the book. I'm just going to kind of, let's see, take a look at where I left off, because I need to get some information on that creature. And so today we're going to do something a little bit different. There's a bit of a time skip between the last topics that I was talking to the channel about, as well as between basically what's going on in the book right now, right? So the book for Kenix actually takes place about 3,000 years into the future, in which Animus, like when it was first conceived, up until the point in which the main story takes place. And so because of that, we've got different types of technology, we've got different types of just civilizations and things of that nature. And so today, we're going to take a look at a type of machine. If I can find it, let me see. Centurion. There we go. Yeah. We're going to take a look at mechs. And this particular one is known as the Mecha Machina Centurion Mark IV. So I need to take everything that we're looking at right here, specifically this section here. I want to take this, I want to translate that into my sketch. So let's begin. Here's Sketchbook Pro. Drawing pin here, glove there. This is by UG, by the way. This has been a lifesaver just to kind of stop things from getting tracked when I'm doing my drawing and things of that nature on the screen. Wait a second. Testing. I hope my audio has been going through this whole time. I really do. Because I had to turn something on a second ago. So if no one can hear me, if you just see my lips moving and nothing coming out of them, please say something in the chat. But anyway, I'm just going to recap on what I said last time. I'm going to translate this one region of the book, specifically this description of a mech that the main protagonist needs to fight. And I want to create a visual for that, right? So extracting all of this, putting it into this, we're going to begin right here. So the Mecha Machina Centurion Mark IV. This is kind of a cool enemy concept that I want to show off. So in the events of Kenix, like I was saying before, because they take place in the future, we've got various types of technological advancements. And one of them, in this case, is going to be the Mecha Machina Centurion Mark IV. And the way how it's described in the book is that it has a sort of obelisk type of presence. And so when I was coming up with this, I had these rough ideas about like how I wanted this thing to present itself, right? Like I want it to be really imposing, really tall, almost like a kind of tower in a way. But this is a fully mechanical robotic kind of arsenal, right? That's mobile and that's currently attacking the protagonist. And so I want to make sure that has the mechanical components kind of built around it to where it supports that description. And so if we're adding on to this kind of obelisk definition here that I was talking about, I describe it as this. His eyes meet the sight of a machine towering above the room. It was an obelisk adorned with dozens of optical sensors supported on what appeared to be four drill-like legs. A massive crescent blade pointed from its front, seemingly in place of a face and torso, as four arms created both. Okay, actually, I need to tweak that grammar a bit, but what I'm trying to say here is that this machine, this kind of mechanical creature, in place of a face and in place of part of its torso, it's got this really strange crescent-shaped kind of structure that's kind of protruding from its front. And guys, this is going to look so janky in the beginning, but I promise you, you will not be disappointed when you see the end result. So if we're looking at this from like a side profile, right, we have this kind of obelisk thing, like I mentioned here. We have this crescent-like shape. I mentioned the four drill-like legs that this has as well too. Part of me was thinking that I could have them either somewhere positioned here in the front, like so. Again, this is a side view, like super ugly rough draft. So we've got like 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I mentioned this notion of these kind of, four mechanical arms that emerge from the shell-like structure that embodies it, right? So we've got like this shell-like defense that's kind of meant to form a code protection around it. And I'm going to be honest, like I don't like this shape as of yet, right? I want this to be, I really want this to embody that Centurion description that I mentioned before. And when I think of, Centurion, I'm thinking about things like, a horse, a warrior, and I kind of wanted to embody that kind of perspective, that form, should I say. So I'm going to hide this for a second. I'm really going to try to max this out to more of the image that I kind of foresaw in my head. So we're going to continue this notion of having an obelisk, except this time I kind of want to tilt it out at an angle. And for the four mechanical legs, I'm thinking that it would be really neat if we kind of gave this almost like a sort of, horse-like body in the back. Not necessarily a true horse, but just kind of following a little bit of that body plan to a certain extent. So we've got like a longer kind of stretched out back in addition to these legs that are supposed to protrude from it. Let me see if I'm doing something with this file correctly. Yeah, that's what I thought. The resolution's a little bit low. I'm going to bring this up. Yeah, I'm going to say that feels about right. We'll just double the size. All these are miscellaneous details that don't really matter for the creature design. So I'm going to shrink that down a little bit. I want to play around with this idea of really giving this that essence of mobility that I'm talking about in the book. Yeah, just like a scifiart, Yvonne. Welcome to the chat. And so, similar to that horse kind of body plan, or, in this case, centaur like body plan, we've got these legs that typically, would kind of fit a horse in a way to where this back one here wouldn't invert. I kind of want to play around with something a little bit more unorthodox here, right? So I will have this invert. I kind of do want to see what happens if we give that an additional double joint. And for this one, if we stick with a more traditional leg plan here. And this is way too thin for what I'm envisioning, but still, I just want to get like all the bad ideas even like out of my head and onto the paper. And so I'm going to come back to that body plan, right? Because this is, again, just very rough wireframe. I'm kind of going to focus a little bit more on the front and the head and torso area that I was talking about before. So that crescent shape that I mentioned in chapter 19, what I'm going to do is, if you would typically expect a head of a creature to be somewhere around this region, then because of that description that I gave, where it's not following that traditional body plan that head would, I want that bladed torso to also kind of carve and jut out like so. So it's not a true crescent, at least in that kind of perfected definition, but it is borrowing from much of the same geometry that you would expect when you're looking at that type of crescent shape. And glad to hear it, Devon. Yeah, it's it's a rough idea. The essence is all there, but the visuals need to follow. So that's what we're going to do today, if I don't erase it by accident. So I'm going to move this guy down because we're missing quite a few things. We're missing the arms, and we're missing that kind of shelled defense system that's supposed to have around it as well. And so we're looking at what I'm going to call like the anorexic version of this idea, because this region is still like way too skinny, way too skimpy from the idea that I have in mind. But it's a good start just to kind of keep it grounded, so to speak, in reality, at least in the reality that I'm imagining with how this thing is going to navigate on foot. And so we have this region here. I want these arms to form that barrier that I'm talking about. And so to do so, I kind of want it, I want the kind of shoulder area, so to speak, to be up this way, right? So we've got something that's kind of unorthodox that's happening right now. Traditionally, in real world nature, a face or head would be somewhere around that region, and I don't want this to look as though it's derivative from something that you would see naturally, at least 100% in wildlife. I do want to have a sort of a artificial and manufactured presence to it. And so, this is kind of going to hopefully embody that. And I just want to call something out. Devon, you made a really good point there. It does look a little bit like a Hercules beetle, doesn't it? And that's kind of part of where the inspiration came from as well, too, with this design. But even with that, right, like a Hercules beetle, it's got its head, believe it or not, like somewhere around here. And then you've got this horn that curves up like you see in this area. And to that point, it is very reminiscent. But I even want to kind of break that mold, so to speak, to where like there is no clear head on this. And things start to get different when I start putting on the arms, right? Like it's going to look a bit more alien, I think. For instance. Yeah, I'm quiet right now. I'm kind of trying to figure out how I want these hands to come off, these arms here. And as you can probably already see, we've got a scenario that looks pretty strange, I guess you can say, with this body plan. And you can kind of see these regions to where this is an arm over here, right? And then we've got something else that kind of extends as a foldable arm within another arm out here. And so, this creature, this machine, the more I look at it, I kind of want to give this almost like a General Grievous sort of body plan, at least with regard to like how it pulls out its arms, and additionally how it deploys its weapons as well too. So if we're taking a look at, I believe this is, I could be wrong, femur, I think. I can't think of my anatomy. Tarsus. Anyway, if we're taking a look at your forearm, what I want this creature to have with its is another forearm within its forearm. And so when it's deploying its weapons, right, it's got its main hand, but within that, there's another hand that can stretch out. And even more so in stretching out, there's another arm that can come out as well too, to where it's very, just kind of multi, I guess you could say it's very versatile when it comes to how it can manipulate different objects and things of that nature. So I'm going to test out this arm plan first. And yeah, Devon, it could form a pincer. As a matter of fact, when I was kind of envisioning like what this thing could do, this thing being the Centurion in combat, part of it, I was thinking about the melee combat capabilities of it, in addition to like any sort of magical and projectile capabilities too. And so either one of those two arms could assist in that way. Like it very well could form, like two lasers and kind of do like a vice grip pincer maneuver on something as well too. So still TBD. And now for the other part of this detail, which I was alluding to. These arms that they're meant to form a sort of defense around it. They're meant to provide a basically like shielded shell, so to speak, for the creature as well. And so I do want all of this to give it a very flushed feel, right? And to do so, that's going to take a bit of work. It's like from the side profile, it's very easy to give that illusion of like, oh yeah, like this is flush, but it needs to go even further to where when you're looking at from the front, the back, top down, it's still flush, and it's just like with how all the parts are coming together when it's in its defense mode and it's like offensive mode as well too. But I'm going to come back to that and put some more thought into it in a little bit. I'm going to circle back around the legs area, because right now it looks like it skipped leg day. And what we can do is turn that opacity down a little bit. I'm going to start working on different concepts to overlay on top of these legs, right? So in the book description, I said before that has drill-like legs. For any of you guys who have played Metal Gear Solid Rising, I believe, Devon, help me out here. I can't remember if Raiden's game was Rising or Revengeance. I think it was Revengeance. I could be wrong. What I'm trying to get at here is that, Hideo Kojima, he had some really cool mech design that also kind of leveraged part of this idea that I'm trying to show. And not only, did Hideo come up with this first, the particular design that I want to incorporate into this, like the real world term, is something called or known as mecanum wheels, to which in some robot designs that we have today in real life, you have these kind of treads, if you will. You've got wheels and then you've got these treads. And the treads, what they look like are kind of like these spiral like drills, right? And the cool thing about them is that depending on how they rotate, if one is moving clockwise and the other is moving counterclockwise, you're able to have this machine, or this uh, chassis, whatever's put on top of it, essentially strafe, and you can have it move in different directions, really depending on how the rotation uh, alignment is for those wheels. And I want to apply the same thing to this here. Thanks, Devon. Yeah, so it was actually Metal Gear Solid Rising Revengeance. It was all of the above. So if you marked that as your multiple choice answer, you were correct. But that's the reference I'm talking about here. And we're going to see how this looks. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Again, super, super rough. I think one thing that's really difficult for me, especially as an artist, is if I'm showing my work publicly, like I'm doing right now, in front of the world on a live stream, I hate showing it in a way to where it's incomplete, like just painfully incomplete. And I need to get I think I need to get over that, because one of the beautiful parts about, I think, showing art, especially when it's got its own story and narrative behind it, is the path and the road that it took to get there. And essentially, this is that. And so some of you might be wondering what exactly is going on here, because we've got a few different shapes kind of competing with each other. On one hand, with this side over here, we've got this almost like cylindrical, kind of pattern going on with the wheels over there, right? That's a horrible looking wheel. It's like a 5-year-old's firecracker, I think. But pretend that's a wheel, all right? Three-dimensionality, etc. And then on the other hand, we've got almost this javelin type of approach, where the treads, the wheels and tires are a little bit more diamond-esque in fashion here. And because of that, if we're kind of looking at them like so, they're much more pointed. And I'm going to be honest, I'm leaning a lot more towards this design over here versus the kind of firecracker design over here. Not that this would have intentionally been migrated into this other design, but probably would have been something a little bit more round, if anything. But I do like the pointed part. So I'm going to stick with that. And I'm going to get rid of this, just like that. And we're going to give these legs a rework, because now I think we're actually getting somewhere right now. So at the very least, I'm just going to call them the feet, or the feet wheels, or the feels, I guess. They're going to take this form of being a bit more pointed in design. So essentially, when this thing is walking, it's able to walk and traverse on all terrain, right? Like, it can stab its feet into, grass, sand, mud, and, well, actually with sand, I have a very horrible time navigating, but we're just going to say, it can move on some outdoor terrain, with the exception of maybe like sand and mud very easily. And then in more industrial environments, it can do the same, but it's also got this capability of kind of driving itself with its feet. Those can kind of flare out and rotate like wheels, to where it's able to achieve locomotion that way. And again, we get this drill-like design that I was alluding to in the book. Something like that. Oh, cool, Devon. Yeah, we're actually Devon mentioned something about Final Fantasy VII and how there was a mech in there that also had drill-like legs too, or wheels, I think. Um, yeah, Tetsuya Nomura. I'm not sure if he was also responsible for doing like the mech design and things like that in Final Fantasy VII, but they had some really cool concepts, I thought, in there. I don't remember all of them very well. I never owned the game, just kind of actually watched a few friends, such as Devon, play it on a few rare instances. But I do have the art book, which I also haven't looked at very much either, which I should soon. So that's cool to hear. And here's what we're going to do, guys. So you can see that the legs now have a very different approach, or at least noticeably enough than what they had before. Um, Now we have a total of one, two, three. These are tri-jointed legs, right? So much more common in something that you would see perhaps in the insect world or things of that nature. But I don't want them to be, like skinny, twindly legs. These also need to be robust and, fully capable of articulating themselves in a, very deliberate and a powerful manner as well too during navigation. And so I'm going to add some, I would say meat to the bones, but because this is a robot, we're going to say servos and uh, I guess framework to the bones. And so I'm going to start with this very rough line work again. And the purpose of this is more so along the lines of just mapping out the basic shapes of how this should look and function. And for any of you mecha fans or mech fans in the chat, you're going to kind of start to see what I mean. And you're going to start to probably envision what I'm talking about as you watch me make these basic shapes and then start adding the more complex ones to it. Because basically what I want to happen with this is this design needs to have kind of like a top exoskeleton associated with it. And then beneath will have its own kind of metal endoskeleton coupled with the motors and the components that give it its locomotion necessary. And again, all of this is just going to serve as placeholder until the functionality portions of this really kind of get a little bit more defined during the revised rework of this. So I've got something like that. I think this next part that I'm working on is just kind of a bit more along the lines of form. And so, with this, with any of my concept art, one thing that's really important is this idea of having diversity between the line work, right? Like I don't want to have my contours necessarily running into each other to where everything is perfectly parallel, right? So what I mean by that is, if we zoom in for a second, I had the choice of making this kind of groove in this leg plate go straight, or take this kind of, lightning bolt approach that we see there. The reason why I decided to go with that instead of the, just kind of like straight approach is because that line, this one here, if I were to go with that, would be in direct competition with really everything else that's kind of following that same pattern here. And the eye just starts to muddy all of that together. And that's not fun. So to make it a little bit more bespoke and easier to identify, this is why I'm sticking with this approach of really trying to distinguish, which contour belongs with what on that design right there. Okay, so I think we're getting closer. Nice. I have not tampered around enough with Gundam model kits. Multiple of my friends have, and yeah, if they were in on this chat, they would have a lot to say. But thank you. I'm glad to hear that this is looking like good part separation. That's the aim. Now, what I'm kind of looking at and brainstorming about over here is how do I, in the first place, want to add any sort of plating around here? I don't think I do, at least not directly. I like having that, I'm just going to call it the frame right there. I like having that exposed, giving it some sort of skeletal presentation. Just feels right, I guess, with this type of concept that I have. But what we can add is just a little bit of protection, so to speak, around here to where there's another plate that's kind of on the inside, so to speak, that flexes accordingly depending on what angle that leg is currently on. So again, this is a side rough draft. This is going to look really janky to begin with, but when I add more detail to this, it's going to look A1, I hope. We'll see. Now what it is missing, I think, is that servo right there. We want to have like a clear indicator of that. And I think that between that servo being there, we've got this other one being here, and one more invisible one that's in there. Kind of invisible, I guess you can say. I think that kind of maintains that skeletal approach that I want. And Devon, I'm glad to hear that you think the same thing too. Yeah, I think that people are going to have, everyone's going to have their own opinion, but for this design, yeah, I think that maintaining that cadence, that exposure of that skeleton goes a long way. For this, I'm going to come back and figure out just what arrangement makes sense, I think, for how this is connecting to that. I think I've got something in mind, but for now, for the framework of just how those legs should be shaped, I think it's taken, it's got a good blueprint for the rough draft. All right. And now I'm going to go back and just kind of update a few things here. I think I could probably hide that. Duplicate this. And just erase some of the unnecessary marks that I might not need for now. I always try to make a copy of the early sketches too, just in case I want to go back and experiment around with like the original draft. And so we've got that. And I'm just going to, for the sake of time, duplicate this after I figure out what to do with that layer, mirror that. And one thing that I generally just hate to do, and this is my own bias, but I try not to, like, at least when it comes to final production, I don't like to copy and paste too many components of the design. So this is definitely going to get replaced with a new kind of hand-drawn version of that again. But for now, just for that placeholder, I'm going to keep it there so that I can just envision how another leg could look. And now I'm going back to the kind of main body, so to speak, back here. And so just going back to the lore that I've explained in the book, I mentioned something about, you know, the arms being able to provide a shield sort of defense, as well as having built-in missile launchers, with it as well too. I'm reading the chat as well, so I'm getting a little distracted. But so in building out whatever this structure is going to look like, that shield structure around the arms, I also want to consider what does it look like with a missile launcher, but not only that, but within the world of Kenix, you know, what does that look like? And so this design for this mech, this Mecha mech, is a little bit different than your traditional mech, or at least it should be, in a couple of ways. So going back to discussing some lore in Kenix, there's a difference between Machina and Mecha Machina. And Machina is a general term that refers to machines, man-made machines. That can be anything from, automobiles, but more generally refers to kind of advanced machinery, specifically mechs in this regard. However, Mecha Machina utilize magic in their offensive capabilities and functional or defensive capabilities as well too. Generally, all of the above, if they're combat models. And so, with that being said, there are going to be components on this design that afford the use of magic utilization. As for where, that's still TBD, but that will be decided in this. So let's see something. I'm thinking if we have a joint in this design, let's say we've got a joint right there. I'm going to move this guy actually down there, right? So what could be done is a shield could be fastened onto that arm, right? Like you've got the bicep right here. You could put a plate on that, and then you could put another plate on the forearm itself. And essentially where your elbow would be right here, just like for the mech, that's going to be the point in which that shield can rotate, or at least components of that shield could rotate. And so we want to account for what that looks like when it's flush, as well as when it's not. And I'm just going to come back and kind of fix this up later on. Like, I think its resting state should be a little bit different than what it actually is. But for now, you've got the idea. That's going to just kind of, move, articulate where necessary, depending on how the arms are being used for this design. And so that can be part of it. As a matter of fact, this can probably have another joint in it too, to where the rest of the arm folds out from there. I think that what I'm talking about might not make a lot of sense until I actually show the full thing. So I'm just going to jump into it and just get back into sketching. So we're going to take a look at these grievous arms. I'm just going to call them that for now. And these will have a servo there. There's going to be another around here. And the range of motion will need to account for basically both twisting and I guess you would say yawing in the technical aerodynamic term of it. And so that would allow for this degree of motion like that. This other guy would allow for this degree of motion like that. And I'm probably getting way too detailed than I actually need to for this rough part of the sketch. But for now, we're going to put an arm and a claw there. And again, I'll come back and focus on those details later. And then we'll have this other kind of hidden arm also within this region to where it can also come out into a form that we see here. And again, you know, that will probably get adjusted to a certain extent, but yeah. Got that. And we've got our claw there. And this design is mixing kind of, I guess, a bit of regality to it as well that it needs to have, which I'm going to come back to in a little bit to really kind of put this onto that next level. Let me check the chat to see if I'm missing any questions here. Ooh, yeah, so there's a question from Devon. What's more expensive to produce, machines or machina in this case, or Magia Machina? The answer is going to be Magia Machina for sure. Not just in a financial cost, but also just in a resources cost. There are various artifacts of power that need to be applied to these things, in addition to enchantments, to basically give them the magia, so to speak, within the machina that your traditional machina drone wouldn't have. So for some more detail, in the world of Kenix, there are a few rules that people follow with regard to, I guess, technology use. One of which is this notion of, I'll just talk about like just in random order, again, more lore, but artificial intelligence. So AI exists in Kenix. However, it's limited down to like kind of like a level 2 AI. Anything else is deemed as extremely problematic for society. There are very strict rules on how far AI can go. And so that being said, you do have a lot of machina that's supporting a level 2 AI within it. Now, in terms of Magia Machina, you can have something that's a bit more advanced like that, to where AI is present. In fact, I would say for 90% of Magia Machina, AI is also present too. However, when it comes to enchanting, the components, specifically if that's like armor defensively to resist maybe lightning magic better, say for example, or void magic better, then that's an expensive cost. But also giving them, I guess you can say, I didn't really come up with the term for this yet, but manufactured, how can I call this? I need to, I'm speaking too soon, but yeah, machines don't use magic in the same exact way that people can, because you need to connect to the seed of Logos. And so depending on how people enchant them, there are kind of workarounds with that, but at a limited ammo cost, so to speak. And it can only be done through someone who is capable of wielding magic themselves. So to a limited extent, they can use magic, but it's not the same type of casting that you would see other creatures or even people do within the world. And so right now what we're looking at is just, again, a little bit more of a progressed design. And it's still not where I want to be at, of course, because it's a rough draft. But I can happily say that it's still getting closer to where I want it to be. And so I'm shrinking it down a little bit so that I can add a new layer to it. Because right now we've got this kind of shield arm placeholder, so to speak. We're missing the, kind of central control, area for the other operations that this can perform. Oop. Some of those being like missile deployment, like I mentioned before, and a few other things that are still a little TBD. I'm not too sure about how I want this shape to look just yet. So what I'm trying to do here is create a new region of the body to where if optics and other kind of essential navigation controls are being handled here in that area, then this area over here would handle some other things like missile deployment, like I mentioned before, and potential magic usage. And I feel like there should be an affiliate component somewhere, back there that kind of houses all those weapons as well too. I think the logic for this is still definitely a work in progress for some parts of this design. So you guys are going to hear me just kind of either talk things out and come up with an idea about like what's supposed to do what, or it's just going to be nonsensical rambling. One of the two, but either way, it should be entertaining regarding whichever path is taken. So we're going to see. So I'm thinking, I mentioned that I want this to have a more regal appearance to it. One thing that I was envisioning yesterday was this almost halo-like structure that has on the back, which would also be responsible for deploying spells as well as potential missiles. It might just focus on one or the other. Maybe this is just dedicated towards spells, and maybe there's like a missile pack somewhere behind it. But I do just want to put that placeholder there in the meantime before I continue. So we've got that there. I'm going to check the chat. Let's see what we're looking at. Mr. Ayubi. Yeah, so there's a question from the chat. Danny's asking, what software am I using? Guys, I want to call attention to Sketchbook Pro. That's the name of the software. Danny, I've been using this for years, actually. And it's one of my favorites. It's similar to Photoshop in quite a few ways, but it's a lot more, I would say, focused on just the principle of drawing itself. You've got fewer bells and whistles than Photoshop. But I think that the precision and kind of accuracy in how brush strokes are captured in this program, in my opinion, I feel like that's second to none. So yeah, Autodesk, not Adobe, but I often use Sketchbook in a combination with Adobe to kind of bring my sketches to their final form of fidelity. Okay, so we've got that. Dude, I hope I'm like a modern day Bob Ross. That would be so cool. I mean, I'm just missing, like some of the views, but yeah, man, I try. Just just grow out my hair, like dye it red, whisper a little bit more. All right, guys, so we're just gonna make a happy Mecha Machina mech. Gotta add those missiles, make sure they're smiling. Something like that. I could practice the voice a bit more. So I'm just gonna kind of do a quick recap really quickly. I've got this rough shape, this rough series of shapes over here, and this is not anywhere near final, but it's given me enough to where I've got a kind of basic framework for what type of body plan I want this creature, or this machine in this case, to kind of follow, at least from a side profile. The next thing I want to focus on is kind of refining that from a frontal view. And then from there, also got both of those angles, that side and that frontal. I'm going to actually go ahead and start to increase the fidelity a bit more, so that it's really just materializing in a way that's a lot more tangible and makes more sense to a viewer that's looking at it. So I'm just going to put that down like that. And I feel like the more I think about it, this frontal view is going to look it's going to look a little interesting. But let's do it. So we've got our Mecha Machina Centurion Mark IV. That's a mouthful. And again, in the book where our protagonist is getting ready to face off with this thing, it's got this very imposing presence to it, right? Like this thing breaks open the door, it comes into a room, and when the dust settles, it's just towering over the main cast. Before, I don't want to spoil too much, but before the fight really begins. And in doing so, there's this very alien presence about it, because it doesn't really have like a visage like a typical, I don't know, monster would, or like it's missing a face, it's missing all these other things where it's like, how do I identify this threat in front of me? It doesn't have any feelings. And all that being said, I want to really embody that same essence in its design as well too. And so starting things off, first and foremost, I'm going to try to focus on grabbing that kind of crescent-shaped front and translating that into the frontal view right here. And one thing that they will teach you in industrial design school and architecture school is this notion of trying to scale the various proportions of your drawings into their respective viewing angles. And one thing that you're going to see with that are these guys. You've got these guidelines, right, to where I'm going to show you kind of how this works in real time. You've got these guidelines where you can kind of trace to see, like, okay, the point of this kind of stops somewhere around here, right? And with that, you can start to kind of get these somewhat accurate depictions of where things begin and where things end in your drawing. And that's kind of what I'm doing here with the Mark IV Centurion. And again, like, this probably looks more high fidelity than what it actually is supposed to be. Like, I just want to emphasize, this is still chicken scratch. It's going to be chicken scratch still. But that's fine, because the main objective of this is to get that framework established for the shape. And so you guys might have just seen me pull out that tool a second ago. As a matter of fact, I'm just gonna, don't hate me. I'm gonna erase all this down here. This tool that I'm using is a symmetry tool, and is going to allow me to reproduce various lines and angles. As a matter of fact, like I was saying, reproduce various lines and angles of the drawing on both sides. We've got that one here, like that. So that's what's happening right now. And it just saves a bit of work. I'm going to zoom out. So in the meantime, for anybody else that's still tuning in, today is July the 5th. For anybody that wants to talk about their 4th of July, if they did anything besides, I'm not sure, like I didn't do anything, but like grilling, you guys are more than welcome to talk about that. Whatever you guys want to talk about. Tell me about you. Tell me about something exciting that's happened while I think about stories to talk about while I'm drawing. One thing that just came to my mind, while anybody else is kind of typing what they want to type, is I haven't made a video in a minute on the channel. And that's because there's been a lot of stuff happening in life. I'm trying to figure out where the camera is, and I just realized it's boom, right in front of me. But a lot's been going on, and I've been trying to adjust to all of that while still making time, of course, for the channel and for Kenix and content. And so, yeah, I'm going to talk more about that because I'm sure you guys are wanting to know more about that. Hey, Yakovlev Art just joined the channel. Yakov Art. Welcome, Mike. Happy to have you here, man. Prescott, you as well, too. Very happy to see you. Devon, I'm just seeing your message about rolling dice on the 4th of July. Something about that sounds familiar. I feel like I was there rolling dice too. As a matter of fact, I would say that we might have been rolling dice in a certain Baldur's Gate 3 together. Or it could have just been a fever dream of some sort, but yeah. For those of you who don't know, Baldur's Gate 3 is a super fun game. I have to say, I think that game's really impressive just in terms of any sort of RPG adaptation. Just the mechanics are out of this world. It's a very accurate one-to-one representation of your typical Dungeons and Dragons kind of gameplay format, but just put into a really well done RPG video game. So I'm doing a not so good job explaining it, but I had a lot of fun. And guys, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some updates in my life as well too. But before I do, I'm going to talk about this. So I've got a few questions in the stream, and yeah, Mike, to your question, what I'm working on is a enemy design for a creature, for a mech that's featured in chapter 19 of Kenix. And I'm just going to kind of take a moment and zoom out for a second. I want to kind of bring up the prompt here that I'm working with. Oh my God. Let's see. And spoilers ahead. My apologies. Read at your own risk. In the meantime, I'm just going to focus on this guy over here. So in this chapter of my book, we have our main protagonist, and he's getting ready to square off with this new entity that's made a very violent entrance into one of the chambers of this castle that he's in. And this security protocol, specifically, it's called a Mecha Machina Centurion Mark IV, breaks its way into this room, and it's about to fight the protagonist and his team, and they're about to fight it. And so the way I have it described in the book is like so. I'm going to read this. It was an obelisk adorned with dozens of optical sensors supported on what appeared to be four drill-like legs. And this last part needs to be like tweaked a bit, but a massive crescent blade pointed from its front, seemingly in place of the face and torso, as four arms created both a shell and missile launchers around it. So I'm taking this text and I'm transcribing it into, this sort of creature here. And the word towering is used in this context to really just imply the massive height of this entity, because when it comes into the room, it's towering over these characters. And so what's happening right now is that design being reproduced into a drawing. I'm going to take a look at the chat again. Let's see, because we've had some commentary pop in. Let's see. So for everybody that's just hopping in, this or that, welcome. I was just saying earlier that I'm working on creating a enemy concept for one of the creatures that appears in chapter 19 of my book. And so just do a quick reiteration of what the book is and, how that's in relationship to the channel. Creative Animus, my YouTube channel, has really been dedicated. Oh no, Mike, thank you for that. This is exactly why I need to take this book and its manuscript and get it proofread, which is a different topic. Mike was just saying that I misspelled towering. Instead, I had towing, or towing, a towing monster. Anyway, what I was saying about this, what I was saying about the book for Kenix and Creative Animus, is that in the life cycle of the channel, I've spent most of my time talking about the universe itself, the universe of Animus that the book takes place in. Now, what I haven't talked about as much is the fact that the book actually happens 3,000 years into the future, following the advent of the world. And so with that, the protagonist, the other characters, they all exist within this realm that's overseen, or that I guess is undergone a few crucial changes, such as technology popping up that wasn't there before. And in this case, one of these things would be something like the Magia Machina Centurion, a type of machine, robot, mech, that exists within the universe as well. And yes, replying to Devon, Devon just said that I need to send the chapter to him to proofread it. Devon has been my, how can I say, official, unofficial, but trustworthy proofreader throughout the entire development of Kenix. He's kind of been along for the journey for quite a few years, to be quite frank. And he's always kind of taken a very keen interest and a very thorough, sorry, I'm getting a little mixed up here. He's been very thorough with his proofreading as well, too, for the book. So yes, Devon, I will send that your way soon. And guys, what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of working on, like I said earlier, for those who have been here on the stream, but I'm working on that frontal view of the creature. And what I'm doing is trying to scale some of those proportions appropriately. And technically, this is a little bit bigger. It's a little bit, off proportion, but that's okay. So long as the scale is kind of accurate, the main goal is to get the thumbnail and the rough sketch kind of handled for how this thing should look. Because everything that's happening right here, this is still very rough draft work. And so once that's done, the final draft stuff will come about. As a matter of fact, that needs to be angled out a bit more, I think. I can put this guy like so. We're going to go like that. Okay. Guys, for those of you who don't know, I want to kind of do a quick shout out to some work that Mike has been doing. Mike, he came in the chat as Yak of Art. He has been creating some amazing 3D renders, and he's really done a very fantastic job on some of his work with kind of reimagining and reinterpreting Akira. Especially in this kind of like 3D Blender environment. I highly recommend that you go take a look at what he's doing on his channel because I think it's super cool. And he's recently kind of started putting out a few more things where he's explained some lore with some of his sci-fi artwork and kind of cityscape building and all of that. So check it out. And yeah, let him know what you think. Let's see. Checking the chat. Let's see. All right. Bear with me, guys. Yeah, Mike, thanks for the tips for that. I need to probably give that a further investigation as soon as I finish this stream, but that actually sounds like it will be really useful. So what I'm working on right now is the arms for this creature. And again, I'm doing this in a very rough draft way, like I mentioned, but I do want to talk about the mechanics for a second. So what I want with this design is something that's very modular when it comes to its kind of functionality and just mobility, right? So the arms themselves, I'm calling them the Grievous arms, but what they do is they are able to fold up within this kind of shield casing that doubles as a sort of defensive shell. And in folding up, they're also able to deploy a second pair of arms that exist within the first pair. Hence, me calling them Grievous arms. The idea was kind of initially borrowed from Star Wars. I believe Grievous showed up in episode 2. But yeah, when General Grievous showed up and kind of how that design approach was handled, that's definitely giving some inspiration to this one here as well too. And I'll show you that in action, I guess, as soon as I finish up this design here for this particular arm. And again, all this is rough, so we've got like these just like very basic shapes for the fingers and all of that. Now, the second arm is going to kind of swing out from within that forearm that I was talking about, right? So it's going to kind of do this sort of maneuver, or that sort, I guess you see it in the camera. And so what that's going to look like is something that comes out from here and that drops down. That's weird. There we go. That drops down like so. Actually, one second. That angle of direction is not correct. We want something a little bit more like this. And again, placeholder, chicken scratch. You guys get the idea. So if I zoom out, oh no! Yeah, I thought that might happen. Guys, I freaked out for a second because of the fact that part of the sketch was not captured on the other side. So all the sketching that I was doing over here on the right-hand side of that line um, kind of got cropped off, basically, on the left-hand side, where you can see, yeah, the lines in. So not the end of the world. We do have the basic kind of anatomy charted out with this so far, but yeah, I thought that might happen. Lo and behold. Wait, I spoke too soon. Okay, apparently it did capture it. That's a surprise, but one that I'm not complaining about, so that's definitely good. So yeah, false alarm. Now, one thing I didn't talk about with regard to the channel and myself was really, kind of like how life has been and like what the next content should be to expect on here. And so, one of those things that I kind of just want to jump into is just, like life after Spain. So for those of you who don't know, I traveled to Spain about 2 months ago and was living, well, no, wait. I guess at this point it would be closer to about 3.5 months ago, and was living there for 2 months. And so I was laid off from my UX design gig because of budget cuts and really just the overall state of affairs in the US economy, namely for white collar and things of that nature. But while I had the opportunity, I decided to go and travel to Spain. I was going to search for more work in Spain, outside of Spain, things of that nature. And yeah, did a few other things over there as well too. That being said, when I came back, first of all, the job market has been abysmal. And so I wasn't able to find any sort of new opportunity here in the US for my industry, design, creative, UX or otherwise, quite frankly. And that's for a lot of reasons. How money's being spent just from the highest levels down, etc. So where that's led me to today is really taking on a lot of work freelance. So I've been doing a lot of design work kind of just a la carte. I've been trying to build up my portfolio clientele for people who have been requiring my services for building their brands, etc. And so in a nutshell, all that being said, it's required a lot of time from me, time that unfortunately has had to have been taken away from the channel in a few regards. And so what I'm doing now is I'm still kind of, working on that. I'm also working at a restaurant on the side as a server, just kind of, staying scrappy where possible. And what I've noticed and what I've realized, I would say, in all of this is that I want my job security to not be reliant on, big corporations and kind of the ebbs and flows of the market that they exist in. And so I'm really trying to kind of move into working privately for that and a lot of other reasons. And it's just taking a bit of time to get that all kind of upstarted. And so I just want to say thank you for the patience for everybody who's kind of been supporting, who's been following the channel. But that's what's going on in addition to just like everything else, staying very busy with regard to that and trying to keep things afloat. I feel like that's the nutshell. Like there's a lot more that I can talk about, but I think if you guys have questions about anything specifically about like what that journey has looked like, how it's going, any other advice that maybe somebody like myself can give about how to weather that storm, I'd be very happy to talk about it. So yeah, c'est la vie. All right, so right now, what we have here is a very rough outline of that shape that I'm talking about, where I want the enemy to kind of presents itself like, right? I don't know how I feel about the top of this feature. I don't know about that. I feel like, what if it curved back a little bit to where, let's see something, guys. I'm going to do something a little risky here. Put that there. Let's see how that looks. Like, what would that look like curving back? Me no know. Me no know. I think it's worth exploring. Actually, I do kind of like this idea of having, the frontal part of the torso kind of embracing the core stem behind it. So I'll test that out in a little bit, but I'm kind of vibing a little bit with that. I don't have too many major qualms. I'm going to take a second and check the chat to see what everybody's talking about here. Yeah, Mike, I appreciate that. I would definitely agree. Going back to, what Mike is talking about, in his opinion, he thinks that being able to work independently as an artist is the dream, which, in my opinion, I wholeheartedly agree. And not just as an artist, but as any sort of creative in general, right? It's not the same. You won't have the same level of liberty working for somebody else's vision as you will with your own. And I think in my experience, is one thing that I'm really thankful for is just the simple fact that I've had the exposure and the experience with, so many companies that a lot of people would die to have that experience with. And that's been a journey in itself. There's a lot of good that I can talk about that. There's a lot of, like bad and ugly. But overall, I would just kind of summarize that to say that I think whenever you're working in corporate, almost with anyone for that nature, you're going to have that same dynamic of, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's just part of the nature of working with corporate. And, it gets, in my opinion, I think that it gets to a certain extent to where you're able to kind of make a decision at some point to say, okay, do I want to continue doing this? Can I afford to step away from it? And if I can afford to step away from it, how am I going to? And how am I going to create my own definition of fulfillment with my creativity? And that's really where I'm trying to get at with all of this in my current journey. Because, yeah, some things, in my opinion, just are not sustainable anymore when it comes to like maintaining that level of satisfaction and fulfillment when it comes to releasing your own work. You just want to have more control over your time, I think, in my opinion. This is one of the ways to do it. It's a long grind, but if you can do it, then do it. All right, guys. I think we're good for this design. And sorry, for this rough draft of this design. What I'm going to do more than likely is come back and really go like all out on making this high fidelity and really fleshing out the level of detail that needs to be present with this, because what we're looking at once more is a very rough draft of how things are shaped. And I feel like between what we're looking at here and what I wrote here, I think that there's been a bit of positive headway, I think, between this. I want to find that word, towing. There we go. Thanks for that, Mike. Towering. That's what happens when you write things at 11 p.m. But yeah, guys, I'm going to read these questions. Let me see. So, thoughts on Patreon, this or that. Let's see. I'm reading what you're saying. Yeah. I think this will just be like a good segment in the stream to kind of talk about some of that activity. So yes, Patreon is one of those avenues where I am actively seeking support on there. Just financially, small amounts and things of that nature. And yeah, not everybody can support, and that's perfectly fine. But the magnum opus, I think, that I didn't really talk about in the midst of what I'm dealing with, kind of economically, financially, as a creative professional, the magnum opus that I'm really trying to drive at is what we're looking at here. It's my work on Creative Animus, specifically for Kenix, so that I can eventually get things like my book realized. Right? That's really what I'm going for right now. What we're looking at is the very rough draft of the kind of unofficial cover art. And ultimately, this would be like the manuscript for the book. But Patreon is one of the best ways any of my followers can support, so that I can transition into making a living, making you guys happy, and making, frankly, myself happy by taking all these ideas in my head, this entire universe that I've built up, and putting it in front of you. So yeah, Devon, thank you so much for your support. There are quite a few people who are supporting Mike. Thank you for your support too. And really everybody. I think right now there's a total of 7 supporters currently on the channel, 2 of which are paid. And the goal really is just to grow that community so that more of this can kind of get put out in front of you. So yeah, this or that. Thanks for that question. Those are my thoughts. I hope that answers it. And on that note, guys, I think I've been on for about 1 hour and 30 minutes, and I need to get ready to get ready. No, get ready to get ready. That's a double entendre. I need to get ready to go to the restaurant that I'm working at in the meantime. So I just want to say thank you again for everybody who's tuned in. It's meant a lot. And I'm actually reading more comments right now, but I'm going to finish this thought first. It's meant a lot, and there's going to be a lot more to come in the future. So the next video that I'm planning for the channel is going to be a long format. I want to start the transition between the current timeline that I've expressed for Creative Animus into the new one that the story and the events of Kenix actually takes place in. So all the concepts that you've seen, all of the fundamentals that I've explained so far are all going to culminate together into the book itself in a way to where we're living that experience through a protagonist who's going on an epic adventure. So I'm looking forward to that, and stay tuned for that next video. All right, guys. Thanks again for tuning in. I am out. Until next time, stay easy. Peace.